Hey everyone, I'm Anthony Cosgrove, the co-founder of Harbr, and today I'm joined by Patrick Jacolenne, the founder of Data Logic 360. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll cover a range of topics, including data monetization, finding the right business sponsors, and how you can avoid alienating people. I can tell you right now that Patrick has some unconventional but deeply pragmatic views, so I'm really looking forward to this one. To quickly introduce Patrick, he has over 20 years of experience in data, including C-level positions across finance and real estate. He has a strong focus on data strategy and is typically tasked with aligning innovation with the core organizational objectives in order to drive return on investment. Patrick, great to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Anthony. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. So, Data Logic 360, essentially, it kind of helps businesses productize and kind of monetize data. What tend to be the key sort of drivers for building a strong foundation to do that?
Yeah, so I think some of the foundational building blocks to being able to monetize data, one come from understanding the way in which you can utilize data from a governance and compliance standpoint. So not all data is the same or classified the same. So understanding perhaps regional nuances around a particular regulation or compliancy laws or your own internal policies and standards. So I think there's a lack of general awareness around the ability to utilize data and how it then can be utilized, both internally as well as when you talk about monetization, which is typically pushing data outside your four walls. So I think that's one foundational building block. And then I believe the other is really around understanding what data has value and then what data of that data is valuable. And I think there's a clear distinction between value and valuable. You could say, I believe my data is of value, which every CEO, CFO, CIO, CDO comes in and really gives us kind of that pitch. But then we say, is it valuable? Which means we take aspects of those data sets and go engage with the customer. And the voice of the customer is really where you solidify, is it valuable? It may have value, but are they going to pay for it? Which is where the valuable component comes in. And so we've built some proprietary methodologies to really assess and evaluate of all the data they have, what is truly value to them from an organizational standpoint, and then what's valuable to the market. And so we see really the kind of those two things as foundational building blocks. One, governance and compliance. Two, the identification and evaluation of what data is deemed valuable and can be monetized from there.
Awesome. And you mentioned a couple of different roles there. Who do you tend to see sponsoring these kinds of initiatives? And I guess which ones do you think are the best sponsors for these initiatives?
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of a flavor, and ironically for us, we see it traditionally sits outside of IT organization, and so predominantly the P&L owners are championing or sponsoring an initiative like this, where they see an immediate need on being able to package up data in a new and novel way for a market, a segmentation. So that's one persona. The other is the CFO. They are looking at perhaps all the data they're acquiring, cost associated to data acquisition or data operations, and seeing opportunities to really be able to present data in, again, a new and novel way to either, improve the bottom line or top line growth, which is typically in partnership in synergy with the P&L owner. And then the third is the chief data officer. You have a chief data officer who comes from a traditionally non-technical background, they're more business savvy. They're evangelist around data and its value, not only internally to the organization and trying to democratize data, but then how do we make it accessible to our customer base and looking at ways of reselling, cross-selling, embedding data, as well as analytics into existing products and services that perhaps creates new opportunities to monetize.
Interesting. And you kind of spoke a little bit about the interplay there between, a P&L owner and the CFO. What about the CDO? Is there kind of typically good interplay with those other two roles? Like, do they come in threes? Is I guess the question I'm asking.
Yeah, the ironic aspect about the interplay between the CDO and CFO is what we're seeing as a growing trend around the CDO reporting to the CFO. And so data is becoming a part of the balance sheet, if you will, especially for organizations that acquire massive amounts of data and have that as a line item on the budget as it relates to the data organization. They want to offset the acquisition cost by the ability to monetize. And so there's a strong relationship between the CFO and the CDO on really kind of fostering and unlocking those opportunities.
And do you find that the approaches taken by those different roles vary, or are they all kind of going through the same processes and they're all kind of at a similar level of maturity?
Uh, I would say that there's definitely differing approaches or differing stages of maturity depending on experience. And I think all are challenged with the notion or concept of a data product and even discrepancies around the definition of a data product. I would say probably the closest role or persona to that is the product P&L owner, mainly because they have the ability and track record of taking individual pieces and parts of in a product, kind of compiling that in a way, doing pressure testing against the market to then be able to commercialize and go to market with an actual product. So it's very kind of akin to that same methodology around how those raw ingredients of a data product get assembled and then commercialized and then marketed as part of the GTM strategy.
And is that are you seeing a lot of difference between how that P&L owner would engage with data or data related assets? As you said, potentially sometimes for the first time, at least in that organization, versus how they would engage with something else like an app that does a piece of functionality or a particular service or process that that organization might be running. Is it different, or is it broadly the same approach?
I think it's different on a number of levels. First is the type of resourcing skill set and profile of the talent you need around data products versus traditional products. So there's definitely an emerging role that is happening around data product management. And what we see is typically a pod, if you will, of three different personas coming together to kind of drive a data product forward. One is a data product owner or manager. The other is a data scientist, someone who is leveraging emerging and more novel ways of analyzing, interpreting the data, and using more sophisticated ways of unlocking and enriching data. And then the third is the traditional product manager who's kind of bringing the structure and rigor along to provide the guardrails and teach those two other personas how to build kind of a data product under the lens or guise of traditional product development life cycles. And so we found that to be a foundational approach, as well as your existing products and product managers have those established relationships with clients. So they're helping to unlock those relationships for the data product manager and the data scientist to go in and engage to perhaps do evaluations, proof of concepts, and pilots, and really be able to kind of get that voice of customer feedback.
Amazing. And are you finding that when the CDO is the sponsor, they're taking the same approach, or is the CDO sort of coming from like a quite profoundly different place to the P&L owner? And I mean, I think a lot of the CDO work really started with kind of governance and quality and monitoring and complying with regulation. Often, that sort of early stage. I know it's morphed and changed since then, but is the CDO still coming with effectively carrying the weight of all of those other tasks, as well as these new tasks around, well, how do we actually extract, monetizable value from our data?
Yeah. And in fact, I think that it's become a tidal wave of demand and expectation on the CDO as a part of the drive towards digital transformation and monetization, that governance and compliance, as well as risk and overall management and health of the data, is closely aligned. And so it's not only elevated the role of the CDO, but it's set the bar and expectation really high, because now you're not just worried about managing the data from accuracy, quality, and high trust, but there is this expectation that you are unlocking value for the business. And the P&L owners, as well as the C-suite, are looking to you with clear deliverables and data points that demonstrate here's where we were yesterday, this is where we are today, and this is kind of the path forward on all fronts.
Interesting. And then, I mean, your background, obviously, you spent a lot of time, driving ROI from data and insights and analytics and a whole host of other data related items. Um, Data products is sort of like kind of a hot topic at the moment, and I think it's been a hot topic for probably the last year or two. I think data mesh originally drove quite a bit of that. When you look towards kind of data businesses that have been monetizing data, monetizing insights for a long time, data products has really been there and existed and been their bread and butter for decades in some cases. Talk to us about data products. Like, how do you engage with customers who are perhaps encountering this for the first time? How do you engage with people who potentially have been working on data products for decades? Like, how do you bridge that divide? How does jargon and nomenclature kind of play into that?
Yeah. So, I think that there's a clear distinction between the term data product and the concepts and actual approach around data product. And so the term itself may be relatively new and 5 to 8 years old in some areas. But the reality is the concept, approach, methodology as it relates to a data product has existed for decades. There have been businesses where it is their core competency to build models. So even within an internal company, take banking and financial services, they will build a model called default to propensity to default. So this is where there is a portfolio of loans that has a higher likelihood of defaulting based on these characteristics, which could be external, internal factors. And so they've been building a data model, which in essence could be a data product because that then could be sold for a similar use case or provide market analysis as a report that then could be sold as well to gain insights for investors, et cetera. And so I think that's kind of the chasm that we're facing, and we typically throw sexy terminology and new words at something that just creates friction and confusion at the onset. It's similar to the path that ML and AI has taken. To say that ML and AI just originated and the genesis of those concepts was founded in the last decade is the furthest from the truth. The concept, methodology, and approaches around ML, and AI have been in place for decades, but we throw terminology at it. And so I think that's a debilitating factor and something that we have to kind of strike the right balance on around meeting the client where they're at, understanding their level of maturity and sophistication in the organization. And it's not to sell them on the idea of a data product, but it's to discover and disclose existing things that look like data products in their organization, wrap that with the best practices and principles around data product, perhaps not even use the terminology, but you're helping to then propel something forward that they felt like only had minimal value or internal applicability or use cases. And by putting those principles and best practices in place around data products, you organically start to see the muscle memory start to change, think quite a bit differently, and then even approach their customer base a little differently as well and more sophisticated. I think that's one of the challenges as well. If you sell them on the concept or idea of a data product, they then get behind that. They then go to their customer base, especially in a B2B setting, and try to offer up a data product, and that's the terminology they're using. And their customers aren't familiar or associated with that word. Now you've created additional friction.
Right. So you mentioned sort of trying to avoid using that term where it kind of creates friction and it's debilitating. What kind of other terms do you use? And then you also, which was really interesting, spoke about trying to identify things that already exist, which maybe fit the profile of a product or have the potential to be productized or taken to market. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What are the terms and kind of how do you recognize a product when you see one?
Yeah. So I don't think there's really any predefined definition, at least in our eyes, around a data product. We look across the sea of opportunity as far as what already exists and determine one, does it have value, and two, is it valuable to the market? And so for us, I think I would answer those two questions very much the same. Some of the terminology that would be used is a model. So again, I mentioned propensity to default. A model could be a data product. It's being used perhaps internally to be able to profile, measure, and determine the risk or accuracy of something. And that could then be of value and valuable to your customer as well. So again, a lot of the ML or AI models that are being developed have the ability or opportunity to be monetized. An existing report that is doing some form of market analysis. So you could be looking across the housing industry again at default ratios or weather related events that are giving insights into how insurance premiums are increasing based on the volatility and frequency of weather related events. That report may not only be a benefit to you to understand how you pivot your business, but could be also valuable to other individuals as well. And even individual critical data elements could be of value. Take one, like here in the United States, social security number, a unique identifier for all individuals. If you're able to combine a social security number with other key attributes or characteristics about an individual, that could perhaps be packaged up as a set of derived elements as a data product to then be sold and commercialized in the market. So I think there's a number of different flavors and use cases. And we've seen even where entire data sets or databases are monetizable, where you're giving direct access or creating API endpoints for other organizations to tap into your data sets as well. And so, again, I think it's just meeting the client where they're at.
Okay, so effectively using the terminology that the customer, in your case, the customer already has, whether that's an insight, a report, a database, a model, and then for you, and correct me if I'm wrong here, a product is something that has the potential to be valuable, kind of across or outside of your organization.
Correct. Correct. Now, I'll give you a very specific example. So we had a client recently that just went through a digital transformation. And the ability was for their B2B clients to order parts and instruments from a interface or portal. So 70,000 plus of their customers now have the ability and access to go in, peruse a product catalog, add those items to their shopping cart, and then be able to click and buy. Before, that would have been done through a traditional help or support desk type of scenario. So with that, we found that there were additional attributes and known characteristics about those customers that could create additional monetization opportunities through that experience. One of those could be purchasing a warranty as it relates to the actual part and instrument. And so what we help them with is identifying where there's adjacent opportunities and say, let's push recommendations out around warranty based on the intended usage, what we know about this customer. The standard warranty is 1 year, but we know we can upsell to 3, 5, perhaps even 10 years based on certain characteristics. Let's make that part of the actual buying experience. The other was around warranty renewals. We know it's going to expire within 1 year, just standard if they don't purchase an additional warranty. So let's automatically have the portal send them a reminder T minus 90 days in advance of warranty expiration. So they've seen significant revenue growth because historically it would have relied on individuals to track and monitor when warranties are expiring, make sure they're doing a warm touch point with that individual. And the notion of even upselling them on warranties 3, 5, and 10 years wasn't even a part of their kind of focus because they were just so busy on managing the individual transactions. And so this is where you're leveraging technology and now data to drive new and novel ways to offer a seamless experience for the customer, but also then increase your revenue potential.
I love that example because I think, often when we think about data monetization, it involves giving something to somebody else, right? Whether that's access to a model, whether that's, an insight report, as you said, a feed. But kind of what you're grabbing at there is sort of through digital transformation, additional data elements were captured and they could then be recycled into new revenue generating opportunities that didn't even involve necessarily passing the data to anybody else at all. It was just simply taking what you now know and then using it in fairly short order to drive more revenue. So, Patrick, you also have a startup in stealth. I don't know if you can tell us much about that, but definitely interested to hear more if you can.
Yeah, so in 2020, we launched Data Logic 360 as a management consulting company, really focused on kind of strategic advisory services, helping companies unlock monetization opportunities around their data. What we quickly identified and learned is that there's a number of foundational building blocks that are required to be able to make the leap from where they are today to then being able to monetize. And so, what we have started to develop is a solution that focuses on some acute pain points that we've identified around the actual development lifecycle of a product. And so, we're eager to get this to the market. We have a couple of really great design partners coming along with us, and yeah, we're looking to launch here in the next 60 to 90 days.
Amazing. I think a lot of companies are going to find that super useful. Uh, we're actually out of time, sadly. I think I could continue having this conversation for at least another 20 minutes. Thank you. That was, fascinating. For those listening, if you enjoyed hearing from Patrick, you can follow him on LinkedIn or check out datalogic360.com. And I'm sure when your stealth startup goes into the public domain, you'll be shouting about that as well. And if anyone's interested in setting up a commercial or enterprise data marketplace, check out harbordata.com. Thanks for watching.